Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money. With your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 89 of Screw the Commute podcast. We got an old friend of mine, Stan Walters. He's the lie guy. And you're going to hear a lot of cool stuff from this guy, let me tell you. He's been on every major network. I mean, this guy is the real deal, so I'll tell you a little bit about him later. Now, the last episode was 88, how to make a $50,000 video about you and your company for only pennies on the dollar. And we've estimated that mine has brought in about $6 million. So this is really worth it to learn. And even though it's an audio podcast, the techniques you'll be able to take to your video or video editor and really make them work. Now, our podcast app is now available in the iTunes store, but you can check it out at screwthecommute.com/app, A-P-P, and it does all kinds of cool stuff that saves your favorite episodes and makes it really easy to take Screw the Commute with you while you're not commuting. Hopefully you're going on vacation or somewhere, not commuting. Anyway, we got instructions on how to use it and everything at screwthecommute.com/app. Now, we're starting our monthly youth episodes where I highlight a young person doing great entrepreneurial things. Now, there was some confusion on this. Young means up to early 20s. Anybody else above that could be on maybe on the regular podcast, but this is specifically for young people. I mean, I even had an 8-year-old in my her parents were in my program, wrote a couple books, and a 12-year-old wrote 3 books. So I'm looking for the young folks to highlight. And you can email me at orders@antion.com, orders@antion.com for details on how a young person can apply to be featured. Our first young person was Tiffany Hawkins, who's a young girl helping other young girls. So make sure you check out her episode. All right, our sponsor today is the Screw the Commute private Facebook group, where you can interact with me, my staff, and with other great entrepreneurs and like-minded people. And it's a place where my staff and I put in training and business tips several times per week. You can ask questions and get feedback on the things you are doing. I'll tell you more about that later, but you can jot this down if you're in a place you can do it, or it will be in the show notes. Everything we mentioned, of course, is in the show notes at screwthecommute.com. This one is /Facebook, screwthecommute.com/Facebook. All right, let's get to the main event. Our guest today, Stan Walters, I mean, he sent me his intro, and I'm a little bit concerned because he's been in 36 prisons and in 16 states and 1 foreign country. He's known as the lie guy. Now, what's in the world is this guy all about? How did he screw the commute while being in prison? I don't know. So he's an interesting guy, the lie guy, we call him. And if you remember the old Lucy show, Ricky would say, Lucy, you got some splainin to do. So Stan, you got some splainin to do, but I got to ask you first, are you ready to screw the commute? That is. I guess he's back in prison because I don't hear a thing. He's not here. Hey.
How about now? There we go.
Yeah. Okay, you're back.
Well, I was busy tunneling back to the last prison.
Okay. Well, good. So tell everybody about what you do. I mean, you are the top of the line guy in this field and a very good guy. In fact, I asked you to be on the team of my TV show we have in development called Scam Brigade. But just give me a little background on what you've been doing while you're in jail all the time.
Well, I learned a lot from you in about creating great customer experience. You know,
in jail?
and you well, in jail too, yeah. But you always gave more than what was bargained for when I ever went to your programs or to the Butt Camp or the National Speakers Association. So I applied the same thing to my work. I train military and law enforcement and government intelligence agencies about ethical interviewing and interrogation skills. and how to collect information from victims and witnesses as well as the bad guys. So, they could sit there and, just you kind of lecture to them, but that's kind of flat. So it's like when people come up to your retreat, they now get to put hands on things.
Right, exactly.
So in my level 3 and 4 class, the first 1 and 2 is 5 days long. And they get really in depth, and I show them a lot of interrogation stuff and how to use persuasive arguments, things like that. But in the level 3 and 4, on the 4th day, I take my students to prison. And they sit down and have a hands-on practical exercise where they actually sit and interview inmates. I mean, you could pretend all you want,
right,
but it's
exactly.
never really the same, It's like, when you talk about some of these people who are the business experts, but they've never done anything.
Right, exactly, right.
And so these guys actually sit down there, and if they screw it up, nothing bad happens. But they'll sit there and they'll go for 8 hours in a prison interviewing inmates. Everything from cattle rustlers. Had a guy that was stealing. A guy was stealing pigs. Gets caught, right? And I ran into a guy in Texas a couple years ago. He was a Syrian fighter pilot. He's qualified in 2 MiGs.
Uh-huh.
And we got to talk to him, and off camera, we got to spend time with him. He knew a lot of the intelligence background of what was happening in Benghazi and that kind of stuff. So everything in between there.
Wow.
So this experience, they're in a prison, in hostile territory. They don't know anything about the inmate. This is called a cold read. Just like when you encounter a customer, you got to get to know them and develop rapport and find out what their needs are, right? And they'll find out the crime, what they're in prison for. Tell me what happened.
Yeah,
and
so they do know the crime. They would have to have some context, right?
Sure. Yeah. The bad guy says, I got 3 felony counts of felony stupid in the pretty zone or something, right?
Now, what do the inmates get out of it? Do they get extra good time, behavior time, or they just bored?
Well, some of it's bored, but they get a letter in their file that their adjustment committee and the parole board sees he engaged in an educational activity.
Oh, okay.
Or if they're like in a prison where they have a job, for a quarter a day, we'll pay their quarter of the day or the 50 cents a day if they miss.
Aren't you a big spender?
Yeah.
Yeah, most people get grants for hundreds of thousands of dollars to do research. You go in and say, I need $1.25 to do these interviews.
Yeah, rub the face off a nickel. But I've done that in 36 prisons in 16 states in one foreign country. Now, think about this next time I go and teach. I have 1,300 videotapes of all types of crimes. And I can pull this, okay, let me show an example of a guy who's done this, or let me show you a lady who did that. So now it becomes real to them.
Yeah.
Not just all storytelling, but it becomes an action. It's kind of like when you profile somebody's work that they've done, in your business, you've done their video, or they've started their books and so forth. It becomes real life, but somebody else just like them got a chance to sit down to these folks. And I love this. The inmates love it because it's somebody new to lie to.
No, yeah, exactly. Now, what I've always wondered, though, is how you actually pull out somebody's fingernails.
You go to Sears Craft Model 921 pliers is just perfect.
So
on a serious,
how did you get into this kind of work?
Well, way back in college, I was finishing up. I started working with the FBI for about 5 years, and was always watching agents interview and us all types of crimes. I worked the complaint desk. Oh, cool story, Tom. My very first case in court. Okay, so it's a Saturday night. Here I'm 24 years old, and I work the 3 to 11 shift. And when do things happen at work?
Yeah, nighttime, right?
30 minutes before you get off work, right? So this guy calls in. I go, FBI, and a guy threatens to kill the President of the United States, his wife, and his daughter. I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be paperwork forever.
That's what you're thinking, not blood.
No, that's
blood running down the White House steps.
Yeah.
I got too much paperwork.
So I call my supervisor, and I create communications to Washington, D.C., and I call the Secret Service duty agent and tell him. And it's like now midnight, right? I'm supposed to be at 11. So I'm filling out the paperwork, and the guy relieving me, he's on the other side of the office, other side of the building. Phone rings again. And this lady says, did some guy call you a while ago threatening to kill the president? Yes. Why? Oh, he's in our bar. He's still here. He's still threatening. We all heard it.
Oh,
So really, where are you? She gives me the address of the bar, right? So I call and I said, buy him all the drinks he wants. Secret Service will pay for him. So I called the duty agent and I said, and woke him up. He's mad. What are you doing? So I said, your guy is drinking in a bar on your dime. What? He drove out there and arrested the guy in the bar. So at 24, I am in federal court. I've taken the oath to get on a witness stand, and I'm testifying against a guy who threatened to kill the President of the United States. Put him in prison for 25 years.
Wow.
That was my first case. So my whole career has been around those types of things. And the interviewing becomes so important. Everybody's made bad decisions. I mean, it happens.
You're kidding.
Yeah. But you and I have talked about some of the scammers out there.
Sure.
Has anybody ever made a bad decision because somebody withheld information or manipulated them to take advantage of them? And we've all had that happen to us. Well, as an investigator and interviewer, I'm interviewing victims and witnesses who've been scammed, but I also got to interview the bad guy. And I want to know how to do that better. And so I just got fascinated with it and started working and studying and researching. And I've been doing this, going on 37 years now, full time.
Let me take you back, though. You said, I'm working with the FBI. But how did you get into that? What did you take up in school? How did you get a job with the FBI?
Well, I wasn't an agent, first of all. They have support teams. And so I was in college, and a guy I worked with on a farm.
What were you taking up?
I was taking sociology and criminology.
Okay, so you were kind of in that field. All right.
Yeah, and penology, juvenile delinquency and that kind of stuff.
Wait, this is a G-rated show. We shouldn't talk about penology.
Yeah. Prisons.
Oh.
I'll spell it, but I'm afraid I'd screw the word up. And so they had where you could go to work in the staff support and work your way in to become an agent. And so I spent about 5 years and was picked up by another career path. I worked for the old GT Corporation doing the same type of thing. And then I was direct security of a bank. And it got to the point where I decided I love to teach. And I was teaching bank employees and teaching employees about safety and security. And my dad was a Southern Baptist minister, so I'm really good at preaching. Tom, my dad, he's like you. He could read the dictionary and make it sound like Aesop's fables. And so I loved that teaching part. And there came an opportunity. People were calling me, would you show us what you did? Would you describe how you did? And I thought, this could be a career. And that was about 1984, and I jumped off, and I've been doing it full time ever since. Now,
so 84 is when you went on your own?
Full time, yep. 1984, I screwed the commute and went out of my own company.
Okay, so tell us about that transition period. Did you plan this ahead of time? Did you save up money? How did you make the transition?
Well, and I started like a lot of speakers and consultants do, and it's a pitfall. Well, people will pay me to come consult and tell them what's wrong with their bank, and people will pay me because they need this. And my uncle, who was a big executive with the Kroger Corporation at the time, he gave me some advice. He said, it's going to take you a year to get everything in place before you really start making money. He said, just expect it. And it was about a year by the time, I was expecting the phones to ring.
Right.
And I had to take my marketing in my own hands and just started writing letters and calling. And my first year alone, I made $5,000.
Wow. So how'd you survive?
Yeah. Well, my wife was working and she was a nurse, and she's my partner. So we had to work this together.
Oh, okay.
The next year was 15. The third year was 25. Then it jumped to 50. Then it just took off.
Wow.
So in 2000, I was asked to do a television interview on the John Benet Ramsey case. And I thought, boy, I could screw this up if I don't know what I'm doing. And I started looking around, and I found the National Speakers Association. And I talked to them about, here's how you run the business. Because that first few years, when you're new and screwing the commute, you're operating on just your energy. I mean, you just got raw skills. You're like
Mm-hmm.
a 5-star high school player trying to make it in, NCAA,
Right.
or you're great, but you don't have the real thinking and all-around skills. And so I found NSA and they said, you need to build this. In 2001, I went to a conference and you had a breakout. And that's the first time we met. And the thing I remembered, you said you need to have your email list, you need to have electronic newsletter, and a website. And that's where I started.
Wow, I didn't realize that's
Then
how we met.
a couple of years, I think it was a year or two later, I won your discs because I answered those 3 E's or 3 questions
Mm-hmm.
and won the disc. And I became fascinated with my website was built when you built the small websites with WordPress. I do all my own website work. I've done my audio lecture series that I got from you doing your webinar calls. So I've followed your development and your guidelines for all these years in developing a business. And if I were to give any of you folks who want to screw the commute and start, here's the first thing I would tell you. Do not turn your marketing over to anyone else.
Yes.
You know yourself the best, and nobody can market you like you. You have to learn that. Second, you need to learn your customer. If you don't know what their problems are, I'm echoing stuff that I've learned from you and other guys. If you don't know what their problem is, and you can't articulate that, then you aren't going to get phone calls. So I took track of all the calls I was getting. And when I did get work, and people would call, and I noticed there was 4 things they would call about. Number 1, they didn't have any interview and interrogation training for their people. Number 2, the training they took didn't work. Number 3, the training they took was inadequate for what they were dealing with. Or 4th, they were in legal trouble because they were using bad techniques. So all my marketing is around those 4 principles. Mm-hmm. So keep it very tight. Don't try to be everything to everybody.
Yeah,
Drill your niche.
Well, let's tell everybody about the fact that, all this criminal stuff is really cool. And I love the thought of it because I'm into anti-scam and consumer advocacy. But the people on this line, they're wondering, how does that apply to us? I mean, is it helping your hiring? Is it helping your relationships, other relationships? I mean, how can you apply the techniques in the business world?
Well, how many of you ever hired someone to take care of your elderly parents?
Oh my God. I was in Thailand and I got a call from my brother that said, hey, the person you put in there's an armed guard in there sent by the Elderly Protection Agency because she threatened to kill our mother.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a long time ago. I guess I didn't do too well at the hiring process.
I had the same thing. The person giving care to my mom and stepdad when they were elderly stole the checks out of the back of their checkbook and stole $25,000 off.
Boy. Yeah.
So in the hiring, the nursing agency didn't do adequate backgrounds and didn't interview very well the applicant. This lady was a drug user, prostitution, and had a lot of identity theft problems already, and she wound up taking care of my parents.
Oh, my God.
So how about your kids? How about the teenagers? How about the people you're hiring to work in your home? Or somebody who wants to say you, again, like the scam busters, the scams that you and I have talked about several times, many years, that people get caught up in, that, you don't ask the right questions. We want to be too nice, and you don't have to be hostile. And that's the wrong idea about interrogation anyway, it's not the questions you ask, it's finding the right topic to ask the questions about. So with this, I'll teach you how to find that place. Whether you're talking to your kids, whether you're talking about, maybe you're a school teacher, and I train school resource officers. So it's, things happen in schools and with teachers and students, to how to talk to them and gain information without, it doesn't have to be hostile. It doesn't have to be aggressive. When you're hiring employees, or if there's an incident with, human resources person, you're connecting with something that happened between employees at work or between an employee and a boss. So there's broad spectrum application because we're all making decisions based on the quality of the information and how accurate it is. And I work with you how to do that. And it's easier than you think. And you don't have to be a hostile. Again, it's just such an easy conversation to make with people.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, this is extremely valuable because, most people aren't into confrontation. They don't want confrontation. They just want to hire somebody to help them. But just going blind means you could pass up some massive clues that this is the wrong person, right?
Right. Do you remember, now I'm telling my age, you remember I think the singer was Peggy Lee. You remember
Yeah,
her?
sure.
And she was molested and raped at a brand name hotel. And turned out it was a janitor or somebody in that hotel that did it. And the brand name did not do an adequate background check on this guy. And he's there with the keys to all the rooms and
Right.
everything. And she sued and won a big major lawsuit, but it damaged her so much psychologically. She performed only one more 2 times after that. And that was the end of her career
Oh,
because she
my
was so traumatized by what happened.
Yeah, so and a lot of people are working out of their homes nowadays. So this
Mhm.
is even more critical when you bring somebody in now. I
Right.
carry a gun and have protection dogs, but most
Right.
people don't have that kind of background. So, what are some of the things, the topics you need to bring up with potential employees that keeps you out of legal hot water, but gets to the information that you really need to know?
Well, apart from the things like you said, you can't ask the employee, can you tell me about the time that you had a great idea and changed something? And what was that idea? And let them tell you then now, this is where we're going to find out if they stole somebody else's idea. What was the incident that prompted you to think of that? Tell me about that moment that caused you to start creating this idea. And so now you're going to find out, because everybody, study I saw, people 40 to 70% of applications have misrepresentations about the applicant's qualifications for the job.
Hey, they should ask that question to Mark Zuckerberg.
There you go.
All those guys that he had to pay off.
Yeah,
Wasn't his
that's right.
idea.
I remember that. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's interesting on if they stole an idea.
Mhm.
But I mean, can you blatantly say, do you have a criminal background? What happened? Those kinds of issues. Can you delve into those?
In human resources, there's extremely limited things you can say because there's the assumption that if some people have a criminal record, then you're going to be biased against them. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, there's some people, and there's a guy I'll talk to you a little bit later. It'd be great for your show. That I talked to him today. He would love to talk to you about his history,
Mhm.
and he talks about ethical decisions. But people can recover and can understand. So we don't want to exclude those folks that do need a chance and have seen where they've done wrong and got themselves on the right path. But you can't ask about background. You can't ask about marriage. You can't ask about the kids. Now, you can ask about education. What were the classes you liked most? Which instructor had the biggest impact on you? What was the instructor's name? And in what way did they impact you? So that way I want to know the person's inner thoughts. What's moving them forward? What moves them to act?
Well, what I was kind of driving, I was like, what if you owned a gun shop? I mean,
Hmm.
can you? I mean, and a person that has a felony is not allowed to handle guns, right?
Correct.
So are you saying that you can't ask them about it?
Oh, no, if you're going to hire them as an employee,
Right. That's what I'm
I think
talking about.
yeah. Well, in that one you got requirements because of bonding and because of licensing and so forth.
Mhm.
But a easy way to ask that before I do a background, is there anything in your background that you need to explain to me now that I might not understand if I saw it? What would that be? And let's talk about it now before we run the background.
Okay,
And
that's
see,
good.
and then so when that zeroes in, then the person goes, well, not really. Well, there was this one time, and it's a diplomatic way of letting them clear the air earlier
Mhm.
and warn
And they
you,
and they
okay,
brought
let's
it
not
up
look.
too. So
Yeah, they
so
brought it up.
get you off the hook, I imagine.
Hmm.
Now, what is a good way to do, now? Do people have to give? This is a good question. I've never asked anybody. Do people have to give consent to have a background check done on them?
I
It probably
believe they do.
varies by state,
If it's state
possibly.
by state and by company too, and for example, banks and so forth,
Mhm.
banks actually fingerprint you, and they'll run your credit card through the FBI and through local police departments, because you can't have a crime of theft or breach of trust and be
Mhm.
bonded if you work for any financial institution.
Right, right.
And so I would do that. Um, I forgot where we were headed.
Well, what would you ask somebody if they were going to actually work in your home?
Oh, I would ask them about, tell me about your projects. Tell me about where you learned your skill set. How many other people have you done work for? Walk through this project for me. How do you see it? And have him explain to me specifically how the project's going to go. Okay, we're going to build the deck. Okay, now how are you going to set the footers? We're going to do this. Okay, have you had one problem in the past that you decide you need to set the footers differently? And I want him to walk me through like I don't know and explain to me step by step how it's going to go. And if other guys, well, it's good, it'll be all right, it'll be safe, and he's not giving me information, I got a problem. I got a clue for you. The 3 most common places, and this is through empirical research, that people will avoid telling you things has to do with time, people, or places.
Expand
well,
on that.
why? Okay, so for example, traffic stop. Where are you going today, sir? See my friend. What's his name? Tom. Where'd you live? In town. What's his last name? I don't know. They called him Skeeter. What street's his house on? I can't remember how to get there. Get out the car because you're under arrest. So, or your kids, you ask them, what happened to the TV remote? Dad, I picked it up to use it, and all of a sudden it was broke. So you see the jump in time? The next thing I knew, after a while, before too long. So anything around those areas, those are the most common spots where that will happen. So if you know
the
that
jump
going
in time is a red flag.
Is a red flag, yep. And they can't, well, all my friends say, well, tell me which friend and what that person say. Well, a lot of people have. Well, give me an example.
Well, it sounds like the president, right?
Jackpot. Well, in all of Congress,
everybody believes what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
The clown college, I call it, 525 of them.
Yeah, I think they're down to like 12% approval rate.
Okay, good Lord, I know. There's restaurants that have closed with higher ratings than that.
But you know what? You should forget the prisons. Just go up to Congress and interview those guys.
Oh, you couldn't. You'd swing a bat and you'd hit one, you know.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. So have you ever now has anybody gotten by you before? In other words, did you miss clues even after you were an established, expert at this?
I don't get everything, and there's no way you can. But I get enough that I can make an informed decision. At least I can say, okay, now wait, we need to slow down, take some time, take a look at this. And it'd be hard to know that one that got. I've actually involved in research up at John Jay College on this. We went with NYPD and the district attorneys. We actually took inmates who committed murders and rapes and robberies, and NYPD records all their interviews. We documented every word and phrase they used and every body language cue they used, and then we match them back. So when he was lying, what symptoms showed up? When he was truthful, what happened? So, and you can't catch them all, but you'd like to get. Inmates, by the way, when they test who's good at spotting deception, inmates have the best record. They get 68% accuracy in spotting deception. So if you're hitting 68, 70%, you're pretty darn good. Nobody gets it all.
Wait a minute. Run that by me again. The inmates can spot deception, or when
inmates.
They can see it.
Yeah, inmates can spot deception and averages 68% of the time they can spot a lie. They have the highest number.
It's probably birds of a feather kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Together.
It takes one to know one.
Yeah, because in our brutal self-defense class we talked about choosing targets. How criminals choose targets to attack. Oh yeah, and virtually every one of them would say the same thing about every target, exactly the same thing of why they chose that target. And they're a very perceptive group.
Well, that's interesting. I do some training in anti-terrorist training too. I work with a guy named Randy Merriman, and he was with the Combat Hunter Program teaching Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan how to actually track people and to read behaviors, suicide bombers and snipers and so forth. And I work with Randy teaching law enforcement. And we spend a week teaching them. Well, on the Friday night, the last night of class, we take them to, are you familiar with the stockyards in Dallas? Okay, and then like Bourbon Street or 6th Street in Austin. And we hire role players and we put them in the bars and around on the street. So, okay, now for the next 3 hours, guys, you're supposed to look for any threat of all these people in this area. And these role players will interact, will trail them, will find a high position like they're going to be snipers. And it teaches guys, like you said, to be aware of all their surroundings.
Boy, those guys got guts, because what if somebody that's not with you notices them and tries to take them out? I hope you pay those
some of these guys
good.
are SWAT team and Navy SEALs. So I don't think you want to mess with them.
So, did anybody ever screw you over in business?
I have just fired a client, and you can do that.
Yep.
I worked for this company for many, many, many years doing training. They contracted about 40% of my work, and the company recently sold. And the new guy doesn't understand value added, doesn't understand customer service, doesn't know how to do this business. And I was not happy the way he was treating people. And to give you kind of a baseline, let's say that when I worked for that company, I was averaging, again, just a fictitious number, averaging $7 a day.
Yep.
When I do my own contracts, I was earning $33 a day.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for them 78 days last year, and for myself 30 days. And so this is where you have to see your value as a speaker. Mm-hmm. And you cannot underprice yourself. And you cannot start low because you're worried about it. And finally, all this, I said, look, I appreciate this. I've done this 36, 39 years. And he made this statement, well, anybody can be an instructor. Oh, buddy. I said, well, I think it's time for me to move on. I'm getting into my career, and I did it nicely, but I fired the client.
Right.
Because they weren't seeing my value, and they weren't marketing that way with value. So never turn your marketing over to anybody else.
Great advice. Now, what do you like best about working for yourself, and what's the worst part?
What I like the best. I love the classroom. I love the people that I'm working with. I love that I went to South Korea to work with the Army 2 years ago. My wife was really worried, and she said, what if something happens? I said, well, the thing is, one of me, I'm going to train 80 people who can make a difference.
Right.
And so it's a force multiplier. So when you get on that platform or with your business, whatever your business might be, whether it's the carpet cleaning business or if it's up to nurses' aides, you're affecting the lives of the people, make their lives better, or that they can themselves help make their lives better. And to me, what I'm doing with law enforcement officers and intelligence people in the military, it's saving lives at like a force multiplier, but then also helping those people who are victims and witnesses who've been taken advantage of and be sure they get the justice they deserve. And I love that I'm giving that part of myself to make that difference in the world and difference around me.
Good for you. Good for you. What's the worst part?
Sometimes the travel. It's gotten better.
It's gotten better? Are you kidding? I heard they were going to make the bathrooms smaller, and I can't fit in them now.
I know. Gee whiz. I've been in some small ones over in Europe and stuff too. I do real well. I fly Delta, and I've gotten up into platinum level, and it does pretty well. But some of the hassles, if you cannot let it get to you because it'll ruin you.
Right. For sure.
I've learned the tricks. I travel one of the first 3 flights that leave Lexington, Kentucky, because the planes are sitting at the airport. So I'm not waiting on one to come in. So if that screws up, it doesn't screw up my whole day.
Right.
I've learned all the ins and outs and shorts of renting cars. I know the ins and outs of the hotels and so forth, and collect all the points too.
Absolutely.
I took my wife on a 5-day cruise last June, and it didn't cost me a penny because I had hotel points. I took the airline points, and for her 50th birthday and her 25th anniversary, I took her to London, Paris, and Rome, all on points. So that's the nice part about travel. So I always look at when I get home and when I'm in the classroom, when I'm out in the field teaching people. And so that outweighs the negative part. It's just part of getting there. Then I'm turned on, ready to go.
Yeah, and that's a good point with the credit cards. I mean, we pay every possible bill unless there's a premium you have to pay with credit cards to get the points on them. And I especially love it. I mean, I don't do too much paid speaking anymore. I'm mostly public events, but if it's paid speaking, I definitely want to pay the expenses and then get the money from them. So I'm getting the points free in that case. So right. Yeah, you got to play those games, and you can really, if you're in this, really make out. Hey, one thing I was worried about or wondering about is,
sure.
Did you ever? Well, you probably have to kill me if you tell me, but could a person like you train spies to how to defeat these measures?
Yes. And I have.
That's always good
And
to
I
say,
have.
yes.
Well, and it's okay to tell you, I've trained Air Force SEER. Those are the guys that teach pilots how to survive when they're down behind enemy lines and they're captured and so forth. And they took me out to their site out in Washington State and said, "We don't want you to teach us how to interrogate. Tell us how you would do, or what you would do with our crews if you captured them, so we can prepare them for it." And I said, "Well, here's the techniques and methods I use." Then it becomes a matter of just who's better at what. And interesting thing, Tom. One thing they asked me, they said, "Who else teaches what you teach?" Well, and to tell everybody in the podcast, you have to read all the time. You've got to be committed to reading and studying. You got to, or you're going to fall behind. Because I know you're constantly reading marketing. I remember many of the names of the marketing guys that you talk to all the time, that you're reading their work and you're applying it. I said, what I teach, I can tell you it's not taught in the Middle East, and the Russians aren't teaching it. The only people I know is, U.S., Canada, Ireland, Scotland, Britain, Netherlands, West Germany, some out of South Africa, and some out of Japanese. I don't see any other research anywhere else that their people are teaching this, which is good news and bad news. Good news is they don't know these techniques. The bad news is they were going to resort to brutal tactics. Yeah.
Did you say verbal tactics or other tactics?
Other tactics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Stuff.
Yeah. So what do you have that we could buy to learn more about this stuff? What do you have? Do you have courses for regular schmucks like us, or
Sure.
only militaries?
I've done that, and I'm getting more into doing like PPO regulators like EPA or Water and Quality Control, claims adjusters, attorneys, so there's plenty that they're out there. You just have to catch up with it. But I've got a couple of resources there on my website that you're going to have linked onto yours that I think folks will enjoy. The one I think is a good primer is my book, The Truth About Lying: How to Spot a Lie and Protect Yourself from Deception.
Oh, that is great. That's been around a while, right?
Yeah, and it's in 7 languages now too.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So it's been all over the place. And it goes into deception, but it's not the hardcore interrogation stuff that I do. But how do you talk to your kids? If they've been at a party where there's been Molly going on, there's some pot going around, if there's somebody's been drinking and driving or that type of thing. And for school resource officers or teachers or human resource people.
Or business owners, right? I mean, because we don't have a human resource in a department here. It's me, you know?
Yeah. And so it's easy little book to read, and it's more about communications. And if you're in a relationship and you're keeping score who lied to who first or last, that ain't going to be much of a relationship.
Right.
But how do you foster honesty between the two of you and recognize when the other person's hurting? So you see the behavior and say, okay, there's something bothering you. How do you draw that out and not be in a threatening situation? And add that, and make it a better communication.
So you're a marriage counselor too, it looks like.
Yep. I've been married 43 years.
43 years. Wow.
My sweetheart, and she runs my books, and she helps with the company, and she saved my bacon more than once on bookwork.
You got a good team.
And see what, Tom? Tell you what, I'm going to throw something in for you. I've got a freebie.
Okay, great.
Okay, if they follow your link over to my website, you want to look for the book, and if you like this stuff, it's a 60-page ebook, Practical Kinetic Interview and Interrogation. You'll see it on the door, on the shop. It's free, and that's something else I learned from you. Offer something first, and this is a primer, and you'll learn some of these techniques and how it's applied for investigations, and then how you can use these proven tactics with the truth about lying at home and with your employees, etc. And so that's my gift for everybody, that you're welcome to take as many copies as you want.
Yeah, and that'll be in the show notes for us now. And if anybody's out there in any of these kinds of law enforcement or places or human resource departments, how would they get a hold of you to book you?
Well, you can find me there on my website, thelieguy.com. That's TheLieGuy.com. And you connect with me there. My phone number's there. I'm over in the Eastern time zone. You and I live in God's time zone. God lives in the Eastern time zone.
That's what I say.
But you can catch me at 859-873-7005. or drop me the email through the link there at the website. Be glad to talk to you about
repeat
how.
That number again for him.
Sure.
And it'll be in the show notes.
Area code 859-873-7005.
Sounds good. All right, we got to take a brief break for our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to ask Super Stan here, what's a typical day look like him? I think we'll split it up into when he's on the road and when he's home, and how he stays motivated. So, folks, Screw the Commute private Facebook group is where you can interact with me, my staff, and with other great entrepreneurs and like-minded people. And it's a place where my staff and we put in training and business tips several times a week. You can ask questions and get feedbacks on things that you're doing. And I give you quick tips that have made and saved me tons of money over more than 40 years in business. And myself and my staff also give you more in-depth postings on all kinds of business topics. So check it out in the show notes at screwthecommute.com. Put on /Facebook if you want to go directly to that. And it'll also be in the show notes where you can find all Stan's great stuff. So let's get back to Stan Walters, the lie guy. He's the guy that's been on every major network in the world and been in prison a lot.
visiting.
Yeah, visiting. So give us two ways that what a typical day looks like for you. One when you're on the road and one when you're home.
Okay. So on the road, for example, I've got a class coming up. I'll be up in Ohio next week. Typically when I fly, I take one of those early flights. So I'm up at about 4:50 a.m. and I catch one of those early flights. I get in 1 or 2 o'clock. I like to be there. That gives me plenty of time a cushion in case weather or bad traffic and so forth. And I can settle in. I'll get my snacks and so forth, from Wally World, because I've eaten on the road. You've done this. You've eaten on the road so much that the thought of another powdered egg at Holiday Inn Express does not sit.
All right, but you're flying in on the day of your job?
The day before.
Oh, the day before. Yeah, that's right.
The day before.
Yeah.
And so class usually starts at 8 o'clock. So I crank up class, and I usually start with some type of what I call a tea time movie, a funny video. But all my videos somehow relate back to a principle that they will later learn in class. So I use it as a callback. Mm-hmm. And so I might have anywhere, for example, I'm doing 5th Group Special Forces in a few weeks. And I got to keep these guys engaged, right? So we go from 8 to 4, and I give them a little bit of homework, a little dab of reading. And I go through basic principles. I give them a handout so they can keep track, of their elements. And they keep those handouts when they get home. And that's how they find you later, right? If they want you. Because those guys spread out to other bases.
That's right.
And so then they say, hey, I had this class with this guy. I had a call yesterday from a guy who I had in West Palm Beach, Florida, who's now the chief of police in Torrington, Wyoming.
Wow.
He said, Stan, I had you last year. I'm the new chief. My guy needs training. And on the spot, scheduled, sending the contract. It was all done and on paper in 90 minutes.
Yeah. And I just got to mention this is those guys in the special forces and the police guys, this is life and death, right? This is the person's necessarily handcuffed to a table. All right. Sure. This is stuff that's on the street also, and or in a third world city, right? Or hut.
Yeah. On Battlefront. And one thing that I've always done, because my family is very important to me. So in the hotel room at night, I'm answering emails. I'm writing chapters for a book. I am doing a blog, or I'm doing, scripting my next audio series or whatever. So when I get home, I belong to my family for that weekend. And so I balance my work that way. So at home, my wife and I, our regular date is dinner, and we go to a movie, or we like sporting events and so forth. Then get with our kids and grandkids. I got grandkids now, Tom.
Wow. You've been busy.
And so I created products. One is a phone little. You remember Cliff's Notes in high school or college?
Sure.
Okay. So I was working an arson case, and a guy I had in class invited me he wanted me to help do the interrogation. And we get ready to interview this guy, and he's got this ratty bunch of papers, and he's flipping through and going, that's a lie. And he's flipping pages going, that's a lie. And I thought, what in the world? So I took him, I said, what are you doing? He said, I can remember this stuff. You interview all the time. I said, well, why don't you he was going through his handout.
Oh.
I said, why don't you make some notes? He said, well, you're the damn instructor. Shouldn't you do it? Huh. There's a problem.
Yeah.
So I made a pocket guide.
Yeah, there you go.
And that little boy, that is my top seller. Some of my book sales have paid for fencing around my farm, has paid for my pool. So extra products that your people want to screw the commute, remember to create multiple streams of income.
Well, see, I heard a couple that as you went through that you got all the tricks down on flying and all the tricks down on hotels and everything. Those are ebooks that would sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. for the traveler. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then at home, it's with my family. We're getting ready to sell my farm. We're going to move to Florida.
Wow. Where at? What part?
Near Sefner, Tampa, Florida. It's between Brandon and Tampa.
How'd you pick that?
Wife, my wife has some land. Her mom left her down there, so we're going to go down there. And this is planning. I'm going to build the doorways to the bathroom extra wide, so when I'm old, my wheelchair will go through.
No, you're a good planner. Yeah.
But you plan those things, and you learn to not let the travel get to you. You find, when the flight's delayed, don't stand in line. You call the hotline, and they'll take care of you.
Yeah, there you go.
And always be nice to everybody around you, because you can
Absolutely,
go up.
Yeah.
You've had that. If you had the flights late, and the plane's on a mechanical, and the guy in front of you, if you don't get this plane, I'm going to ring. And I'm thinking, no, take your time, fix it. I have to take as long as you want. And you go up to the desk and you say, I'm sorry he was so mad. I'm not in a hurry. You do take as long as you want. And I get into laughing. Mm-hmm. That's when you get a free drink coupon and a free meal ticket.
That's right.
So the travel is as good or as bad as you make it in your own mind. Take control of the travel for your own sake.
Yeah, and I used to be a charter pilot. I don't know if you knew that,
Mm-hmm.
but we always used to say it's better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than in the air wishing you were on the ground.
There you go, bingo. Good point.
All right,
I just want to thank you too, because of all the years following your ideas, and you created ideas in my mind that I can extrapolate into my particular niche. And so one of the things I can tell the people on Screw the Commute, if you got a question somewhere on developing the marketing, somewhere in Tom's CDs, somewhere in his audio series, it's there, from writing ad copy, which I've studied a lot and learned from influence on that, from doing the one-page websites. The thing I love, Tom, is my company is mine. I run it. I make the choices. I don't turn over to anybody. Now, you can hire the people, but you know what they need to do. You know what the outcomes are. And you've taught me that for years. And I've always enjoyed my company because of the skill set that I've learned.
Well, yeah. So everybody wants to delegate, but then they might as well put a target on themselves, because the person knows you don't know how long it should take or how much it should cost. But if you've done it already, I forget who I heard this from, but I heard this from somebody that says, whenever I do a bid for a job of anything, I say this should be easy for somebody that knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. That's a really good statement, because they think, he knows what this should be. So I can't inflate the price on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what parting thoughts do you have? No, I missed one thing I wanted to ask you about, is how you stay motivated with all the stuff you got going on, the travel and everything. How do you stay motivated?
One is the enjoyment of what I do, but then I'll get a call from somebody and said, Stan, I had a case where a child, or I had a case where I saw something would happen. I got a note from the battlefield in Afghanistan from a group that I trained, and they were giving me reports saying, Stan, everything you taught in class, I hear my soldiers in the field, in the reports, using the skill set they learned to make decisions on the battlefield.
Wow.
That's what motivates me every day, is knowing that a one-on-one, one at a time, every first responder, every soldier, every intelligence. I've also trained the National Security Agency for 20 years, trained their interrogators, knowing that down the road there's an impact. And for every one of those, Tom, that we have, there's 6 who haven't told you the benefits they've had.
Exactly right.
And I know what I'm doing. It's a force multiplier. I know what I'm doing for my country and for the people and for victims and witnesses. I'm doing it for them.
Yeah, you're really saving lives too, like I said.
Yep.
So Stan, it's so great to reconnect with you, man. I'm thrilled with your work. I'm thrilled with your ethics and all that you're about. And I didn't even know about the. It seems like you have quite a patriotic bent, which I really appreciate. So. Great. So everybody check the show notes, get that freebie, and also get the book. What's the name of it again? The Truth About Lying. The Truth About Lying.
How to spot a lie and protect yourself from deception.
That's an absolute must. I'm going right to Amazon and buy that, unless I can get it cheaper off of your site.
I think you get it cheaper off my site, I believe.
Anyways, so great, and we'll have you back one of these days on some. And go deeper into this.
I'd love to.
Thanks so much, man. And for everybody else, this has been episode 89. Check the show notes, get your freebie, go buy that book. It's going to help your business just in the hiring process and in the everyday operations, let alone life and death stuff. So get a hold of that stuff. Don't forget to grab a copy of the app at the iTunes store, but you can read all about it and get the instructions on how to use it if you're not real familiar with podcast apps at screwthecommute.com/app. And we hope to see you in the private Facebook group at screwthecommute.com/Facebook. Hey, everybody, we'll catch you on the next episode.